Jackie. It's always nice to be introduced by a Pittsburgh person. I have a theory that Pittsburgh people just sort of know how to talk to a crowd. Steelers. You never meet, it's like, Steelers is just nothing but drugs. Right for Steelers. So, and Jackie and I have sort of known each other for years now, but we've just met for the first time today. Because the wonderful world of literary citizenship in the 21st century is I think we've done interviews, and I did a layout in the magazine, and then we did this interview and a radio interview, and we only just met now. So that's a pleasure. And speaking of pleasures, it's just been a pleasure to be here. I knew very little about Norwich University 24 hours ago, other than they were gracious enough to invite me. You buried the lead, Sean, about the fact that you were going to be in a dress uniform all day. I think you waited for a little bit, and so it was great to sort of have that surprise, but also just to sort of see what a school in Vermont is like on a snowy day like today, to walk around and see folks sledding down the hill and talking and thinking and listening to the different classes that we passed. I think I heard some French and some other things, and this has been great. And of course, I think I've met, like 40 students today over the course of the classes that I sat in on, and that was a real thrill. It's much more fun. I'm excited to read for you all, but it's much more fun to sit still and talk and get a pulse for a university through its citizens, and you guys did not disappoint, so props to you all. I'm going to read a couple of things from the book. I had a hard time figuring out exactly what I was going to read, but I think I'm going to... We talked a lot in the classes about process, about how you put an essay together, especially in the 21st century. What some people think has an essayistic tradition that began in about 1965, but really when you have millennia worth of nonfiction essaying to draw from, how do you structure it? You certainly don't structure it like the 5-paragraph essays that you wrote when you were in high school. How do you move through a series of facts in a way that engages a reader? And I think the Wilhelm Scream essay is a pretty good example of a practice that I like to use, which is find a subject that you're fascinated with, figure out why you're fascinated by it, and then pick a language for discussing that fascination that will get the audience as close as possible to the way, whatever the piece of culture makes you feel. That's a just 2-cent tour of what I do. Thank goodness nobody will ever be able to call my bluff on this, but what I really do is just sit in a room loaded with Post-it notes and cat fur and cry for 2 months and hope that an essay comes out of it. But I can say, there's a podium in front of me that I do that cogent thing. So I think I'll read that, but unfortunately I left my iPhone in the office, so I can't play you. Those folks that were in the second class that I talked to will be able to replicate it at some other moment. So I'll do this essay about the Wilhelm Scream. And I didn't mention how grateful I am to the College of Liberal Arts and to Dean Talentino for having me. So thank you very much for that too. It's been a real pleasure. So the Wilhelm Scream. When I was a second-year graduate student, I was trying to figure out how to spell Ennio Morricone's name. He's the spaghetti western music composer. And as an Italian, I should have been able to spell it right, but I couldn't. So I went onto Google, and there was a page for a film that he had scored. And in the trivia section on the page, it said, Wilhelm Scream at minute 45:13 of this particular film. I don't even remember what the film was. And I just love that phrase, the Wilhelm Scream. And then I Googled around a little bit, and I figured out that it was the stock film sounds that had been used in over, I think at the time it was about 250 movies, and now it's like 350 movies. It's in every Quentin Tarantino film. It's in 2 of the Star Wars films, 2 of the better ones, I might say. It's in the Indiana Jones films, and then it's in like A Star Is Born with Judy Garland. It's in Howard the Duck. It's in Toy Story. The most recent one I heard. When you write an essay called The Wilhelm Scream, you get a lot of emails when people find Wilhelm Screams after they read the essay. Somebody told me it's in The Hobbit, so if you checked out The Hobbit, it's in there. And nobody really knows who made this scream. Nobody knows who made it. There's a theory that it's Sheb Wooley, who's sort of this 50s guitar guy who's most famous for the song One-Eyed, One-Horned, Flying Purple People Eater. But I looked as hard as I could to figure out if he was actually the person that made this sound, became this sound clip that got put into all of these films, and I couldn't find any definitive evidence. So it's exciting to me that it's sort of a mystery screenwriter. So I found all that out, and I tried to figure out what I wanted to write about in terms of the scream, other than isn't it cool? I The thing that's really interesting to me is that as much fun as we have with it, putting in commercials and episodes of Community and kids' cartoon movies, it's supposed to be the sound of someone dying, right? It's supposed to be this death knell sound that we're playing all these sonic cinematic jokes with. So I wondered if I could sort of talk about what was hilarious about the sound and talk about that weird prospect of that death sound in an essay. And I don't know if I was successful, but I finished writing it, so that's a success in itself. Here we go. The Wilhelm Scream. 1951. Exterior, swamp, dead. The camera rolls. A patsy stands waist deep in a soundstage mock-up of Florida alligator water. You know the type. Chicken eyes, hat askew, plywood gun. They never give guys like this a real gun. The water around him burbles. Something's got his right leg, and the patsy kicks that leg forward, throws back his hands, opens his mouth, and makes absolutely no noise. Most of us take our first gulp of air and immediately hurl it from our lungs in a scream. Perhaps this is a rejection of our initial breath, or maybe it's a celebration of hitting the outside world with both lungs running, but regardless, from birth, our vocal cords work like fingerprints, telling the unique tales of our specific bodies. The sounds they make bounce around inside us and convert tones into name tags. Hello, my larynx is this large. Hello, my sinuses are stuffed with mucus. Hello, my diaphragm is stretched tight. Listen to its shape as I spring air from it like a trampoline. Pleased to meet you. Like breaking a box of emergency glass to pull an alarm, when we make our voices scream, the beeline of serious air not only buzzes the famous chords that create speech and song, it also crashes into a second pair of flaps at the top of the larynx, called the false vocal cords. And this creates the grate that we hear in the screamer's tone, a grate that articulates the rarity of its use. It says that a scream is physical work we should only force on ourselves at moments of ultimatum. That's why we know in our hearts to come running when we hear a scream. But storytelling complicates this physiological fact. Imagine a quiet Warner Brothers studio in the dead of night, and a man whose name we'll never know watches the dailies of the film Distant Drums in a cloud of cigarette smoke, warming up his voice and thinking of alligators. He's a looper, a vocal pro hired to redo every unmiked sound in the film, responses to punches, crowd gibber, ballroom laughter. So he studies the mouths of extras like our condemned patsy, so he can make sounds that match their faces. On the screen before him, Patsy dies silently in the swamp, his mouth widened almost to a grin, and the looper then tries to mirror this strange gape, and he leans into the microphone. He inhales, closes his throat, and pushes out all the air that he had just pulled inside of him. Then up in the booth, a man, an engineer, corrals the session tape into a can, labeling it, "Man Gets Eaten by Alligator." Even without the 60-year reputation and cult-like following that has eventually attached itself to the sound clip, "Man Gets Eaten by Alligator" is a remarkable sound. It scrambles up the anonymous author's throat in an emasculating glissando and then slides back down the scale to land on a dejected Equal parts yelp, belch, and exhale. The scream is as dire as it is goofy. A buffet of all 5 falsetto vowels crashing into one another and then falling down a flight of stairs. On paper, it's impossible to render, but my best guess would be capital I, lowercase e, lowercase h, capital A, dash, capital O, capital U, lowercase u, and h, exclamation point. That works a lot better when you read it. Hello, my leg is in the jaws of a gator, suggests the sound, but it also offers something more, because there is no such thing as a pure recorded sound, one isolated from the myriad tones and white noise that surround every environment, even sound studios. Thus, as this man identifies himself through the resonance of his belly and throat, the doggedness of analog also captures the sound of that looping chamber, the buzz of the lights, the weight and tone of the conditioned air, even the whisper-thin curls from his cigarette, they all stow away on the ions that transfer to that tape. Thus, the reality of this original moment embosses itself in the real along with the wavelengths of the scream. And though the audience members will hear the nameless screamer make this exact sound in this exact space at least 200 times in the next half-century, we will never be on a first-name basis with that original voice, that natural body, or that primordial room. Cut to 1953, exterior Cheyenne country. A
A posse of cavalrymen rides through the woods to save the kidnapped McKeever sisters. And as they enter enemy territory, one soldier, Wilhelm, lags behind. Sergeant shouting, "Wilhelm, Wilhelm." Wilhelm responding, "Wilhelm, yeah, I'll just fill my pipe." Cue an onslaught of Cheyenne arrows, one of which hits Wilhelm mid-thigh. Wilhelm clutches his shot leg, opens his mouth, the sound of a man eaten by an alligator. This is getting, my age is really showing. I'm having a hard time seeing my words here. I'm like Dorian Gray in reverse, like I'm aging before your very eyes. I'm not aging at all. That time is over. Anyway, so the sound of a man eaten by an alligator. For many historians, filmmakers, and sound buffs, this is where it begins. Not with Distant Drums, which was the first film to use the scream, but with Charge at Feather River, where a named character, albeit an insignificant one, has the scream placed into his mouth. Hence, then and forever, the Wilhelm scream. This film also marks the first use of the scream as horseplay. Wilhelm is not the only character who dies making the sound. Later in Charge at Feather River, a Cheyenne falls from a cliff while Wilhelm's screaming, and a few scenes after that, a nameless soldier takes an arrow to the heart while making the same noise. 3 sonically identical deaths in one film. And if you heard the clip today in class, or if you go home and Google the sound, it's not the kind of sound that sounds like all deaths. It's kind of like, ah! So it's like this, like 3 people making this weird, like parrot, kind of Howard Dean-esque sound. Very, very conspicuous. Sorry, everyone. Howard Dean. So anyway, 3 sonically identical deaths in one film. And these types of shoot-em-ups audiences expect a few dozen expendable deaths, be they in the bloodless technicolor of the 1950s. Perhaps the film was over budget and script on sound, or maybe the editing crew was too lazy to check for gaps, but my hunch is that if you spend each day taping death knells and killing people off, you feel the urge to get creative. The body's got to have a little fun. So the scream is an off-camera nod between sound artists, who are as much packies as any on-screen extra is. Their Wilhelm hijinks acknowledge perhaps the strange parameters of their nameless careers in the Hollywood system. A devious prank made even more devious because only those who know how to listen will catch for it. It's a middle finger right under the nose of the viewing public. Imagine, months later, Charge at Feather River debuts at the Pantages, and as always, the sound crew gets the nosebleed seats. They watch Wilhelm shriek in pain, his larger-than-life eyes wide and pleading, and as he screams that hysterical yelp, a smattering of ladies wince their sympathy for poor what's-his-name, and again later for the other soldier guy, and maybe even later still for that Indian fellow, while the soundmen around them all laugh like hell, and then they wonder what else they can get away with. 200 films later, the answer is plenty. Cut to present-day, interior, the annals of film. Hello, my name is Gunman. Hello, my name is crew member. Hello, my name is passerby. Hello, my name is stormtrooper. Hello, my name is the third Indian. Hello, my name is Mad Chinaman. Hello, my name is Haradin warrior. Hello, my name is an enemy soldier, a rebel soldier, a Nazi soldier. Hello, my name is drunken cartel honcho. Hello, my name is a clown. Hello, my name is a mime. Hello, my name is a cello player. Hello, my name is duck hunter. Hello, my name is Mr. Brown. Hello, my name is Buzz Lightyear. Hello, my name is Cujo. Hello, my name is Thug Number 3. Hello, my name is Victim. Hello, my name is Someone. Does it relax us to watch these types of characters perish? Moments after the theater darkens, we assign our loyalty to the principals. Leading man, comic relief, wise elder, character woman, wacky best friend. Those headliners are our kin. We then prove that kinship by treating extras and day players like outsiders. Nameless henchmen are folks to whom we don't send Christmas cards. Hard luck vagabonds are the kind of people we pass on the street without greeting. Sometimes the relief of watching the anonymous die because of the knowledge that they are ours is so palpable that we laugh with gratitude. Cut to 1954, interior, a rundown shack. James Whitmore is trying his damnedest to stay caught in the unconvincing death grip of a giant ant. He turns his face for camera, perhaps to tell the ant puppeteer to tighten his hold on Whitmore's screaming torso, or else the scene will look more ridiculous than it already does. And Whitmore grips the giant ant's mandibles and flexes, and regardless of what his obscured mouth is doing, he screams for his life. When Puccini throws Tosca from her tower, he gives her cushions of vowels to land on. O scarpia avanti a Dio. And these 10 syllables are as wide open and as pure a series of sounds as the body can make. The rush of well-rounded air stops by only a muted smattering of consonants. And thus, each and every Tosca dies with her soft palate lifted and her diaphragm flexed like a bicep. The big names of Shakespeare die on rounded whole notes as well. Many of his title characters sound death alarms with mouths like egg cups. Hamlet in the bad quarto, oh, 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 oh. Othello in the bedroom, oh, oh, oh. Lear after the undoing of his top button, oh, oh, oh. Even Falstaff gets into the act after half of Windsor attacks him with tapers, one easy on the throat O for each excruciatingly silly poke. And the reason for this is, of course, protection. As Tosca Maria Callas launched her last words around the globe, evenings and weekends for most of her, evenings and matinees for most of her adult life. As the Moor, David Garrick, howled over his fake stab wound for decades. Human throats, no matter how well oiled, can't take the stress of screaming the sounds of the dying. Regular speech, like those vowels above, sends a sweet spurt of air up the trachea, and when it meets the two vocal cords, they're ready for it, bustling each other while they wait. But a scream's rush of unplanned, unsupported air is just too heavy for the vocal cords to endure. Blown back from their gentle position, they stretch unnecessarily or overextend, causing the tissue to warp and swell. Imagine running a marathon with no training. How wobbly you'd walk for the next month or so. And that's one night of hard screaming at, say, a playoff game, after which your voice is hoarse for 48 hours. But now imagine running that marathon again and again, never stretching, never hydrating, and that's vocal damage. Where the repeated strain of unbalanced air actually causes calluses called nodules to harden onto the vocal cords, preventing them from ever closing as prettily as they once did. This injury is a bankable one for very few performers, maybe Rod Stewart or Harvey Firestein. So Puccini and Shakespeare must have both known that tragic heroes with throat barnacles couldn't sell tickets. When my friend Jeffrey had to play a man howling over the corpse of his brother, he trained for the event like a laryngeal bodybuilder. I knew that I had to let this yell out every night, so at that point, basically, the scream was an exercise, really using the diaphragm to get my breath, and my breath to get the sound out safely, he remembers. I didn't have the context of the scene in my mind at all. Instead, what he pictured when he made that scream was the same image that Olivier did when he played Oedipus. An Arctic ermine whose tongue had frozen to a salt lake trap. I use that for the feeling of being totally stuck, completely powerless, he says. The run of this play was short enough for Jeffrey to take some physical risks with his scream. Though he supported his voice, he let the audience have it. And when he screamed in that big warehouse space, people jumped. They thought the sound was recorded, because only in canned sounds, like those in the movies, can a listener be treated to something that's spot on in one take. Only in films do we get to hear something that real. Cut to 1954, interior, a well-appointed living room. You know, I get pretty girlish in this number, beams Judy Garland, as she spins around her Malibu home. She's playing a film starlet, goofing around to a soundtrack record on her hi-fi. Her husband, James Mason, ogles her as she pulls an epic Hollywood production number out of thin air. This is the magic that we expect from America's sweetheart, who needs only a few household props, her big eyes, and her even bigger voice to sell a song. Hello, my name is Unsinkable Pluck. The soundtrack record is a sonic tour of nations. For a verse scored as a French can-can, Garland high kicks, squeezing a throw pillow like an accordion. For a section scored in samba, Garland wields salt shakers like maracas. And then spooky Transylvanian music plays as she creeps across the floor. And that's when Garland mounts the fireplace mantle and strikes a pose, and the record plays that scream. Just as loud, just as anguished, just as primal as it was in Wilhelm's Wild West. Garland poses through the resting measure as the scream fades out, and Mason leers, smoking and slurring, and neither lover seems to surprised to hear the scream. This is, after all, Hollywood. It's with this film that the Wilhelm scream gets really interesting. Because we're not on the Lonesome Trail or in the Everglades or seconds away from being mutant ant food. We're indoors. If the scream belongs anywhere in this picture, it's at the end, when Mason's character drowns himself. I hope I didn't give anything away there, those of you who haven't seen Star Wars Born. Whoops. Instead, in that scene, we watch a soundless, buttery soft death, Mason walking solemnly into the Malibu sunset. And we know he's dead, not from hearing a scream, but by seeing his unmanned cabana robe floating in the seaweed. In the actual scene with the scream, Mason is alive and convivial, and he and Garland are newlyweds, eating sandwiches and singing and necking and bouncing the light of their star power off each other's forehead. So using the Wilhelm here in a musical number, no less, is like putting the scream on top of a chocolate sundae. But then, look again. Because Judy Garland, née Frances Ethel Gunn, was 31 when she played 22-year-old Mrs. Norman May, née Esther Blodgett. But she looked at least 40. Her skin was dull from pills, 2 nervous breakdowns, and liquor. The assistant director's report lists clockwork 6 days. November 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, 19th, 20th, 21st, December 21st, 22nd, January 16th, 21st, 29th, February 6th, 10th, 19th, 22nd, 26th, Judy was ill and did not work. March 5th, 8th, Judy went home, too tired to work. March 16th, Judy left the lot to go to the doctor. April 19th, 20th, 21st, 22nd, 23rd, 24th, Judy was ill and could not make the post recordings. Judy is taking time off to rest. Delivery boys arrived on motorcycles from 5 separate pharmacies carrying Seconal, Dexamil, the paraldehyde that made her smell so bad the makeup girls were loath to touch her. Still, everyone interviewed about the harried making of A Star is Born agrees that whenever Cukor yelled action, Garland plowed through each scene like a prize fighter. Right past the camera, a psychiatric nurse posing as a personal secretary waited to literally catch her in between takes. And nearly all of those takes were fantastic. Since Oscar was yesterday, I should say that she was nominated for an Oscar for her role in A Star is Born, but I went to the beautiful Grace Kelly, and Judy Garland wasn't at the Oscars, she was having a baby, and so a telegram arrived in her hospital bed from Groucho Marx, and he said that her not winning the Oscar was the biggest robbery in Hollywood since Grease. So that was just, it seems very classy. I think that's a good that. Anyway, back to Screaming and Billy. Even though in many ways the use of the scream in A Star is Born is the most laughable, in some ways it's the most accurate as well as the most important, because thanks to this film, we hear the famous death scream in tandem with an image of an actual dying person. By the end of the decade, Garland's liver will all but completely shut down and doctors will pump 20 quarts of fluid from her body. How could any shiny-faced day player with a trick arrow in his leg manage a better on-screen death scene? And what vowels could Shakespeare possibly string together to render this kind of life-or-death tension? And not to mention, the sound engineers placed that scream in the song break, which is a moment of total silence. No hoof beats or gunshots or weather sounds were blended into it. It's also untainted by scoring or Foley effects, and all this makes it the purest appearance of the scream in film history. Because of this, in the late 20th century, when George Lucas, Quentin Tarantino, and Peter Jackson included the scream in their films as homage, it's likely that they pirated the bite from this film and not from the master reel. So it's probably a clip from A Star is Born that we hear in the Lord of the Rings and Star Wars trilogies. It's Judy's Wilhelm scream in Reservoir Dogs, Judy in Spaceballs, Judy in Get Rich or Die Trying, and Judy in Kung Fu Panda, Judy in Planet of the Apes, Judy in Howard the Duck. Cut to 1969, a Mexican soundstage. What's a goofy scream like Wilhelm's doing in a movie, with close-ups on exit wounds and hundreds of gallons of blood packs? 25 people die in the first action sequence alone. Temperance women are trampled by horses. 3 townspeople take bullets in the time it takes an outlaw's corpse to fall from the post office roof. A random horseman rides into the fray, cut to a gunman, firing, and then cue the scream, its power blended into a blur of camera motion. And then cut back to the horseman, close-up, clutching his bleeding eye. His hand covers his forehead, his death now faceless as well as nameless. And when you put the scream this way, maybe it actually could be scary. Soon after the theater gig that required him to scream daily on stage, my friend Jeffrey found an occasion to scream for real. One chilly May dawn, his house caught fire, forcing both him and his girlfriend to jump naked from their second-story window and watch the place burn down before any fire truck arrived. It took less than a half hour for Jeffrey to scream himself hoarse, damaging his well-trained vocal cords into silence for a full week. Only a heavy-duty injection of cortisone brought back any sound, and 4.5 years later, he says he still hasn't totally healed. It was the first time in his life he ever screamed without thinking about it first. When I showed up at his house that day, about an hour after he jumped, Jeffrey was quiet. He paced the crusts of his property, wrapped in an oversized blanket, staring upward with red, dry eyes, and he rasped, oh God, until his voice waned and eventually slipped away as if spiraling down a wet well. And then he was just mouthing the words, like the patsy, slipping into the green swamp water, forbidden to make any noise. Like the woman on the beach one summer vacation, who I watched as a dozen men pulled her bloated blue husband from the Florida undertow. For the hour it took to get him back on the sand, she gripped a lifeguard, swallowing all the air as if to hoard it. Instead of exhaling, her mouth hung uselessly, her slack jaw tipped forward to her concave torso, which jerked inward with each gulp of soundless breath. She sucked the sound out of the periphery. The whistles of the lifeguard, the crunch of ambulance tires on the sand, the swollen tide, they all leapt into her heaving mouth. And then, when she finished eating sound, she inhaled the ridiculous beach tchotchke around her, muting the green frogs that danced over her malleus, the gray and red swim trunks and rainbow towels and SpongeBob shovels and whale-shaped buckets. And then she said something. Her husband's body now black and white. She stood 4 paces from him, the joints of her knees and elbows pointing to opposite ends of the shore, and she peered into the lifeguard's reflector shades and, like a bad actress, ended each whispered syllable with a full stop. I need you to tell me it's going to be okay. Cut to 2006. Montage. A fictitious lobbyist monologues about a colleague. Nick Naylor, voiceover. After watching the footage of the Kent State shootings, Bobby J., then 17, signed up for the National Guard so that he too could shoot college students. But the National Guard recruiter was out to lunch, so Bobby J. ended up shooting Panamanians instead, which is almost as good as college students, only they shot back. A few weeks ago, I identified a Wilhelm on my own for the first time, and it made me feel like a birder spotting rare fowl in the woods without a guidebook. I had rented the satire of Big Tobacco's Thank You for Smoking, which fires the screen within the first 10 minutes of the film. And when I thought I heard it, I reversed the video several times, playing a few frames again and again to make sure. And the screen was well buried in Foley and soundtrack, but it was there. The first time Wilhelm ever waved at me, and I had the chance to wave back. But nobody really dies in Thank You for Smoking. The Wilhelm occurs during a sort of flashback scene in which 3 pieces of archival footage are welded together and underscored by Aaron Eckhart's narration. First, there's a wide shot of the Kent State Commons dotted with 1,000 guardsmen in their gear, and then there's a closer shot of the troops marching with gas mask heads turned toward the camera, and then a final shot of a tear gas bomb firing, trailing smoke on its way to a running man in plain clothes. And he ducks, but the footage is too grainy to tell whether or not his mouth is open. Cue the screen. I imagined another sound studio, this time a digital one. A sound editor watches a rough cut of the film and decides that Nick Naylor's Kent State monologue, when accompanied with the historical footage that the director insisted on, is just too harsh, even for black comedy. So he watches the bomb head straight for the brow of a single human, and he winces. Shit, he thinks, I've got to lighten this up. I've got to make a joke out of this ducking kid and the whole old dead event. I need something to remind the audience that this is only a movie. I need something to make this movie less real. And that's the end. Thank you very much for listening.
So first off, I forgot to also thank the Department of English and Communications. I don't know how I forgot to thank them because that's me. But I remembered now. But we'll also take questions and Elena will give answers. So if anyone has questions, shout them out.
Shut it off.